and welcome to all who are joining us for this special call meeting of the State Board of Education. It is 11 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. Casey Griffin on our staff will call the roll to establish a quorum. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Cobbins? Mr. Darnell? Mr. Eby? Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Jensen? Ms. Kim? Ms. Kim?
Here.
Mr. Krause? Mr. Krause? Mr. Morrow?
Here.
Madam Chairman Hartgrove?
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have 8 members present.
Thank you. We have a quorum present and we are duly convened. I do want to take a moment to recognize Garen Hamby to the State Board of Education. He was recently appointed by Governor Lee to serve as the student representative to the board. Garen is an honor student at Eaglesville High School in Murfreesboro, and we will more formally welcome him at our official meeting in November, our quarterly meeting. So welcome to the State Board. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to serving with you. I now recognize Dr. Sarah Morrison for a few opening remarks. Dr. Morrison.
Madam Chair, I will be very brief, but I'm just so pleased as always to see all of you this morning, and thank you for your continued commitment and dedication to this work. We've met more frequently in the last few months than we usually do, and I know all of you are very busy people, but certainly appreciate the time that you've spent reviewing for today's meeting and really look forward to our discussion, particularly on these charter appeals. So no further comments from me, Madam Chair, but just glad to have everyone and appreciate again your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Now we'll move into a statement of necessity provided by Ms. Angie Sanders. Ms. Sanders?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Angie Sanders. I'm the General Counsel for the State Board. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated Section 844-108B3, the State Board of Education submits this determination of necessity for its special call board meeting held today via WebEx at 11 a.m. This meeting was called to consider a number of time-sensitive issues, including COVID-19 waivers for school districts and charter school appeals, as well as consideration of policy revisions and approval of basic education program allocations for fiscal year 2021. Due to the time-sensitive nature of many of the items on the board's agenda, as well as current restrictions on in-person gatherings related to COVID-19, it was determined that this meeting should be conducted electronically to ensure the State Board could carry out essential business in a safe, transparent way that avoids creating large gatherings of people. Notice of this meeting was posted on the State Board's website, along with the agenda and instructions for accessing the WebEx. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. The next item on the agenda is the consent items. Before we move to adopt the agenda before you, I do want to make you aware of the fact that I have heard from at least one member who may need to leave the meeting before we conclude. And so as a result of that, I am recommending that we switch the order of our items. And that means that I'm suggesting that items currently 4, charter school appeals, that they come before items 3, action items on final reading. And so with that being said, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to approve the agenda as I requested it be changed, flipping the order of the charter schools with the final read items. Is there a motion?
This is Mike Edwards. I'll make the motion.
Bob Eby, second.
Mr. Edwards provides the motion. Mr. Eby provides the second. Any discussion or comments about that? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Mr. Darnell? Eby?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards? Mr. Ferguson?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen? Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Mr. Morrow?
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted to accept the revised agenda. So let's move into the charter school appeals with the first item, which is now item 3A, Cornerstone Prep School. Dr. Morrison will lead us through 5 charter appeals today, so I turn it over to her.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Yes, we will now spend time walking through each of 5 New Start charter appeals, 3 that are seeking to open in Metro Nashville and 2 that are seeking to open in Shelby County. Just a note for all of you and the public watching, this is our last cycle of New Start appeals before this work will transition over to the Charter Commission in 2021. And just another note that our own Tess Stovall is going to be leaving us here soon to go lead that work with the newly formed Charter Commission. We're thrilled for her and obviously very sad to see her go, but thankfully for us, she's not going far. I think the commission will be located on the same floor in the same building as our offices. So once we're back operating as usual, we'll be seeing a lot of her. So really excited for her to make that transition, but also very sad to lose her from our team. In part, though, given the circumstances for which we find ourselves amidst the health crisis, these appeals before you today are more complicated than some of the ones that we usually hear. And as such, Allie and I are going to spend some time here in just a moment walking through each appeal, both in terms of the review committee's findings as well as my own recommendations. Before we do that, however, I'm going to turn it over to Allie to provide just a little bit of background in terms of our statutory charge and the extensive review process that our staff is engaged in that leads up to the decisions before you today. So, Allie, turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Allie Gaffey, Deputy Director of Charter Schools for the State Board. So the State Board is tasked with hearing several types of appeals, and so I'd like to start us off by grounding us in our statutory charge specific to New Start applicants. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-108B4, the denial of the local Board of Education of an application to establish a charter school may be appealed by the sponsor to the State Board. Between late July and early August, the State Board received 5 New Start appeals in compliance with this statute and State Board Policy 2.500. These 5 appeals are listed here, and we'll discuss each in detail shortly. In terms of the State Board's appeal process, State Board staff follows what's outlined in Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-108B4, which states that the State Board shall conduct a de novo on the record review of their proposed charter application. Specifically for each appeal received, our staff moves the appeal through a 3-part process that's designed pursuant to this statute, to State Board policy, and our quality authorizing standards. Within our quality authorizing standards, the review committee's work aligns with Standard 2C, rigorous approval criteria, which states that a quality authorizer requires all applicants to present a clear and compelling mission, a quality educational program, a demonstration of community support, a solvent and sustainable budget and contingency financial plans, a clear demonstration of the effectiveness of the model for the target student population, effective governance and management structures and systems, founding team members demonstrating diverse and necessary capabilities in all phases of the school's development, and clear evidence of the applicant's capacity to execute its plan successfully. While each application has its strengths, the review committee is focused on the merits of the full application against all criteria stated in the rubric. For you, our members, as the decision makers, the quality authorizing standards state that a quality authorizer grants charters only to applications that have demonstrated competence and capacity to succeed in all aspects of their particular charter model, consistent with the stated approval criteria and with little substantive work left for later development. Our appeal process functions as 3 separate parts to create the whole. The first is the work of our review committee, and while their work is weighed heavily, as you can see in this slide, the review committee is not privy to all parts of the appeal process. This year, our staff recruited 5 separate committees to conduct the de novo review for each of the amended applications received. Our reviewers are internal and external individuals with expertise in various areas of the application. are from the intended communities of Nashville and Memphis, as well as reviewers representing rural Tennessee districts and those who work with charter schools in other states to ensure we have a diversity of voices and perspectives. We also work to ensure that our review committees reflect the racial diversity we see in our schools and districts. The review committees are responsible for analyzing the merits of an amended application as measured against all the criteria of the state's rubric. Our reviewers know that every application will have its strengths, but the question for them is whether or not an application meets all the required criteria of the rubric, not just some. In addition to their independent review, our committees hold a capacity interview with the sponsor and provide a final review and recommendation to our executive director. Beyond the work that is specific to the review committee, our staff also hosts a public hearing, collects public comment, and reviews the record in full, including all documentation received by the LEA and sponsor for each appeal. All three of these pieces operate separate from one another and roll up together to inform Dr. Morrison's recommendation. This flowchart here creates a visual depiction of our process, beginning with the notice of appeal that's submitted by the sponsor and ultimately moving through to where we are now with the executive director's findings and recommendation report before you. Because each of the appeals today are for schools proposing to locate in a school district that contains a school on the current or last preceding priority school list, the State Board has the ability to approve the application and thereby authorize the school, or to affirm a local board's decision to deny. Should the State Board vote to approve an application, there will be a 30-day reconciliation period in which the local board and charter school may agree that the charter school shall be authorized by the local board. If both parties do not agree, the State Board shall become the authorizer through June 30th, 2021, in which all of the State Board's authorized charter schools will transition to the Public Charter School Commission. In order to determine whether to approve or affirm the local board's decision to deny each application, we must keep our standard of review in mind. So pursuant to TCA 4913-108B4, if the State Board of Education finds that the local Board of Education's decision was contrary to the best interest of the students, LEA, or community, the State Board may approve the application of the charter school. And turn it back over to you, Dr. Morrison, to start us off with our recommendations.
Great, thanks, Alan. Just a couple last thoughts before we dive into the appeals themselves to try to help frame up our conversation today. First, I think it's important to acknowledge that as an appellate body, we take our responsibility seriously to make the best possible decisions for students, families, and communities, as Ali just outlined, while also respecting the fact that a local governing body has previously reviewed and denied the applications that come before us. In talking with each of you regarding these appeals and others that we've heard in the past, I know that overturning a local decision is not something that any of us takes lightly. That said, as Ali has just laid out, our lens in these appeals is the best interest standard. And so our charge under the law is to determine whether or not opening the school before us is in the best interest of students, the community, or the LEA. This is the standard which I've applied in my review and ultimately in my recommendations, and what I know you will be considering as we discuss these 5 applications today. Second, as Ali mentioned, I place a lot of weight on the review committee's report in making my recommendations to you. But I also am factoring in things that are outside the scope of their review. As Ali said, for example, following the review committee's intensive work to assess the application on the merits, according to the state rubric, we hold a public hearing, we collect public comments, and we request additional information if needed to answer any lingering questions in an attempt to make the best informed recommendations possible. In our current situation with COVID-19, I'm also factoring in implications resulting from this ongoing health crisis, including the lack of state-level data from 2019-20 school year and the exacerbated need to present families with school options that will best meet their children's academic, physical, and socio-emotional needs. And finally, one more note before we begin reviewing the applications. According to our current law, we cannot approve charter applications on appeal with any conditions or stipulations. This does not preclude an applicant from making a change to the charter agreement once approved, but as all of you know, this is an extensive process. There's no guarantee that that will happen. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Ali, and for each application, we will first start with her summary of the review committee's findings, and then I will provide you with some additional information regarding my recommendation. Ali?
Thank you. So the first one we're reviewing is for Cornerstone Prep School. The sponsor, Capstone Education Group, is proposing to open Cornerstone Prep School, a K-8 school to be located in the Sherwood Parkway Village community of Memphis, and opening with grades K and 1 in August 2021. Upon review of Cornerstone's amended application, our review committee found that the application met the standard of the rubric in the academic, operational, and financial sections. The review committee cited several strengths within each section, including the sponsor's strong academic plan that was well developed, had rigorous, measurable, and realistic academic goals, and contributed to all three of the sponsor's existing schools moving off the state's priority school list. The operations plan included clear plans and contingencies for all major operational components of the school, including a startup plan with specific tasks and responsibilities, a process for securing a facility, and the selection of a strong school leader who is from Memphis and has already begun building community relationships and parent engagement in the proposed community. The financial plan included reasonable and realistic operating budgets, provided evidence of the network's strong financial health, and included several sound contingency plans to meet the school's financial needs. However, the review committee found that the portfolio review or performance record section partially met the standard of the rubric. While the review committee found several strengths in this area, particularly in the sponsor's continued academic growth with consistent TVOS Level 5 scores, its accomplishment of being recognized as the top performing schools in the ASD, and in some instances, even outperforming Shelby County schools in academic achievement, and its success in moving all three of its schools, its turnaround schools, off the priority school list, the review committee was unable to score this section as meeting or exceeding the standard because the sponsor's schools are not meeting or exceeding state or national standards in terms of academic proficiency as required by the state's rubric. The review committee noted that the rubric did not provide clarity on how to differentiate and evaluate the performance of an existing operator with turnaround charter schools versus an operator with traditional New Start charter schools. The committee also noted that it was possible they could have rated this section as meet standard rather than partially had the rubric provided this delineation. Still, for this reason alone, the review committee was unable to recommend approval of the amended application. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Morrison, to share your recommendation.
Great, thanks, Allie. As Allie just noted, the review committee in this case was limited by the current state rubric in terms of how they assess this operator's past performance specifically. And so in my recommendation, again, I was looking at the totality of their record and taking that into account in terms of the current rubric and where we might like to see it over time. As Allie noted, it's important to remember that this is the highest performing operator in ASD. They've had TVOS 5s for multiple years now in a row. They've moved all three of their schools, existing schools in Memphis, off the priority list. Their achievement scores match or surpass the local district, and they outperform the other schools in the area in which they seek to locate by a wide margin. It's also a model that's been very intentional about the SEL, socio-emotional learning, and wraparound supports, which we know is critical in turnaround work. So that said, I think this operator will bring the experience, the commitment, and the knowledge of the Memphis community to their new school. It's not apples to apples when comparing past performance when you're taking on the really difficult work of turnaround schools versus sort of regular charter schools, and that's something that we're re-examining in partnership with the Department of Education in terms of the state's rubric. But I feel confident that this operator will provide an excellent option for families in the Sherwood Parkway Village community in Memphis, starting with K-1, starting small, building out that school over time. Again, and such is my recommendation to approve this operator. Angie now has some statements to read, though, in terms of hearing from both the sponsor and the LEA in this case. I'll turn it over to Angie.
So I will start out with the statement from Shelby County Schools and then turn to the statement from Cornerstone. So from Shelby County, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before the State Board of Education's hearing committee and showcase Shelby County Schools' quality authorization process. We respectfully acknowledge that decisions are hard in these circumstances and appreciate our response be taken into account. We are confident that approving only schools that demonstrate a strong capacity to establish and operate a quality charter school, combined with supporting our current portfolio, is how we will achieve our strategic goal of overseeing a charter sector that performs in the top 25% of the state. We did not feel that Cornerstone Prep met this criteria. One of the most critical concerns that we had around Cornerstone's application was the lack of evidence of community buy-in for this school. While we found promise in some components of the application, it is imperative that the surrounding proposed community expresses demand for the school and a willingness to engage. As a quality charter authorizer, it is our job to ensure that we're making decisions that are in the best interest of the proposed community and the Memphis community at large. While Cornerstone Prep showed some promising evidence of growth among their current student population in their academic data, we cannot base a decision to open a new school on only one component of the application. The Office of Charter Schools takes the responsibility of reinforcing opportunities for quality, rigorous education for all students very seriously, as well as acting within the best interests of the community, and we did not and do not feel that approving Cornerstone Prep's charter at this time was the right decision. Shelby County supports that the State Board will uphold the local recommendation of denying a charter for Cornerstone Prep at this time. We support our schools and know that the State Board and Administrative Office have the best interest for all Tennessee students in mind. We hope that you will carefully consider the depth at which our review team analyzed each application and make a decision that supports quality and equitable opportunities for students in our Memphis community. That concludes the statement from Shelby County. I will now move into the statement from Cornerstone Prep. Dear State Board of Education, thank you for investing your time, effort, and expertise to review our appeal regarding the Shelby County Schools' denial of our application for a new charter school. We appreciate your diligence in determining whether the denial by the local Board of Education contradicts the best interests of students, the district, or the community. We were pleased to read the findings and recommendation report of the Executive Director, which revealed the Executive Director requests the State Board overturn the decision of the SCS Board of Education to deny the amended application for Cornerstone Preparatory School. Specifically, the report states the following. Based on the following procedural history, findings of fact, analysis, and review committee report attached hereto, I believe the decision to deny the CPS amended application was contrary to the best interests of the students, LEA, or community. Therefore, I recommend that the State Board overturn the decision of the SCS Board of Education to deny the amended application for CPS. Capstone Education Group board members and staff affirm both the decision and the rationale for requesting the State Board overturn the decision of the local school district. CEG firmly believes that every child in Shelby County deserves access to a quality school that prepares students for college. CEG demonstrated that belief 8 years ago, agreeing to support the state's turnaround plan by accepting the challenge of transforming the lowest performing school in the state. CEG accepted this challenge not because it was easy, but because it was right. Taking over zoned SCS schools performing in the bottom 5% of schools in the state with the mission of improving school and student performance is very difficult work. However, we were honored to serve families in Binghamton and thrilled to watch student achievement improve so much that the school passed more than 150 other schools while exiting the state's priority list. CEG celebrated similar results at its other turnaround school campus in Fraser a few years later. While we celebrate the achievement of our students, we acknowledge they can do even more, moving closer to the state's expectations for all students as found in the evaluation rubric. But we also agree with Dr. Morrison's conclusion along with the review committee's finding. There is a flaw in the state rubric when it comes to evaluating academic performance of operators in a school turnaround context. We ask the State Board recognize the unprecedented accomplishments of CEG in providing dramatically improved educational outcomes for the students and families of Binghamton and Fraser, and provide the families of Parkway Village and Sherwood access to similar outcomes for their children. As Dr. Morrison notes in the report, CEG has worked over the past 8 years in Memphis to successfully move all 3 of its existing turnaround schools in the ASD off the priority school list. It has the highest performing schools of all schools in the ASD, and its schools have a track record of strong TVOS growth scores. The report also states that the Denver campus outperformed not only the ASD, but the SCS district average as well. Additionally, student performance on NWEA math assessment is strong and shows that students are learning at a high level. CEG humbly requests the State Board affirm Dr. Morrison's findings and recommendation to overturn the SCS Board of Education denial, noting the sponsor's track record in Memphis demonstrates that approval of another school is in the best interest of the students and the community. That concludes the statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you. That's the extent of our presentation, and we'll open it up now for discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison, and thank you, Ali Gaffey and Ms. Sanders, for reading those statements from both the charter as well as the LEA. Are there comments or questions for our team from any of our board members regarding the recommendation before us?
Madam Chair, Darrell Cobbins.
Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
For the staff, what aspect of the state rubric would be modified or could be modified or should be modified to account for turnaround situations?
Great question, Darrell. This is Sarah. We are specifically looking at the section that speaks to an operator's past performance. So if you are an existing operator, particularly in Tennessee, one of the things that we're charged with reviewing is your past performance, and the rubric states that you need to be meeting or surpassing sort of state and national standards for student learning. And I think, again, when you're looking at turnaround operators, we need to be a bit more nuanced in terms of the threshold expectations initially. Ali or others of the team, feel free to jump in if there are additional points you think we should add in response.
Sarah, I think that's where we're looking to make some adjustments specific to that section that existing operators would complete.
Other questions or comments from board members before we take a vote?
Maybe I move that we accept the executive director's recommendation.
Mr. Eby provides the motion to accept the executive director's recommendation to overturn the decision of the LEA. Is there a second?
Gordon Ferguson, I'll second that motion.
Mr. Ferguson provides the second. Any other discussion or questions? Mr. Griffin, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins. Mr. Darnell. Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Handy.
Aye.
Ms. Kim.
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chairman Hartgrove.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you all. Now moving on to item 3B, Ivy Prep Academy.
All right, our second appeal is for Ivy Prep Academy, a proposed middle school serving grades 5 through 8 in North Nashville and opening with grades 5 and 6 in August of 2021. The review committee found that this applicant group is comprised of a founding team with vast experience in education and knowledge, working in their intended community, as well as an undeniable desire to serve the students of North Nashville. However, there were several weaknesses identified by the review committee, which led to the amended application receiving scores of partially meets the standards in the academic and operational sections and does not meet in the financial section of the rubric. Specifically, in the academic section, the application lacked a comprehensive plan that adequately explained its model and did not sufficiently outline how it would serve students with special populations, or rather, special populations of students. Within the operations plan, the sponsor lacked a comprehensive startup plan and realistic budget, as well as a convincing plan to secure and prepare a facility prior to the start of the new school year, or to ensure proper staffing to implement its academic plan. The financial plan lacked a complete, realistic, and viable operating budget and did not include sufficient contingency plans should any setbacks with its facility, enrollment, or hiring of staff occur. Overall, the application was underdeveloped, and approval in its current state would not set the school up for success. It is for these reasons that review committee was unable to recommend approval of this application. Dr. Morrison?
It was very clear to me in my review of this application and in facilitating the public hearing that the sponsors are indeed talented, committed, and passionate about bringing more high-quality options to the North Nashville community. However, in this case, as Allie has detailed in her summary of the review committee's findings, I agree that the application still requires more work across all areas, academics, operations, and financial planning, to ensure that the school is ready for a successful launch in year one. So for these reasons, my recommendation is, in this case, to uphold the local board's decision. And I believe, Angie, we have a statement from the sponsor to read into the record before we open it up for discussion.
Okay. So yes, you are correct. We have a statement from Ivy Prep Academy that I will read now. Dear Charter School Appeals Commission Board, after reading and analyzing the notes and the summary from the Appeals Committee, we believe there was either 1, misinformation, 2, inequitable, unrealistic expectations, or 3, misinterpretation. And they've provided a chart. So what I'm going to do is read what they've quoted from the recommendation report and then their response. So the first note from the recommendation: the applicant did not provide any examples of possible contractors for its applied arts or career prep classes. Response: we outlined Moves and Grooves, Creative Soul, TFA Beta Connect, Tennessee Educators of Color, and Fisk New Teacher Program with letters of support from several organizations. See Recruitment and Hiring Guidelines outlined on page 167. From the recommendation report: IPA did not provide details for when these meetings will occur, nor the structure/length of these meetings. It is unclear whether one monthly meeting will be sufficient to assess each student's progress and plan new interventions for every student in the RTI Squared A and RTI Squared B programs. Response: as stated on page 56, we plan to use RTI Squared Implementation Guide as our source. We plan to use the sample meeting agenda on page 36 of the framework in the recommended monthly meetings to assess sufficiency, next steps, and interventions for students. Without actual student data, it is not feasible to determine the specifics, which is why the RTI Squared manual gives a sample agenda. From the recommendation report: the plan includes conflicting information regarding the staffing model for special populations education teacher, and duly licensed teachers are often difficult candidates to find. Response: special population staffing is aligned within the application on the budget narrative and the budget assumptions page. However, whether aligned or not, IPA will provide the necessary support for students and keep IPA in compliance. This is misleading because duly certified teachers were not a new option. See pages 87, 88, and 90. Notes from the recommendation report: IPA lacked the evidence to affirm that this administrator would also be able to provide the necessary oversight to adequately manage a new SPED program. Response: as outlined in the application, our recruitment director will be the SPED coordinator for the first year working with the SPED teacher. They will potentially manage 15 kids. Their roles and responsibilities are outlined on pages 158 to 161. The coordinator oversees and coaches one teacher, which was the rationale for a dual role. It is unrealistic to hire full-time coordinator to manage one teacher and 15 kids. After year one, we will evaluate the workload and transition this role to one of the SPED teachers per page 194. From the recommendation report: the startup budget only included $20,000 in revenue, which was entirely comprised of philanthropic donations from the board of directors. During the capacity interview, the applicant stated they had an anonymous donor, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Response: anonymous donations and philanthropic efforts occur naturally from average citizens and wealthy investors. Donations are standard protocol for everyday millionaires. To assume that IPA, because of its target demographic, would not be able to raise $20,000 is insulting. We believe this is not only an unfair assessment, but a clear example of implicit bias. We have already invested $10,000 in the planning process. From the report: next, the applicant's facilities plan did not provide sufficient evidence that the school had the resources or plan to secure and prepare a facility prior to the start of the 2021-22 school year. The amended application included only one potential school site and did not provide a reasonable contingency plan. Response: multiple facility options were provided. One, a current daycare fully prepared to receive the number of students IPA will enroll during year 1 identified in the application. 2, a local church with agreement to accommodate our students stated in the interview. And 3, a pay-as-you-utilize option at the TSU Avon Williams campus. With the exception of technology prep, there are no build-out costs. All 3 options provide a facility for IPA with little to no prep or cost. We will choose the most cost-efficient option. From the review committee report. Finally, given the projected budget's lack of available reserves in year 0 and year 1, contingency planning is of utmost importance. However, the application does not provide a detailed plan to cut spending if the school cannot meet its projected enrollment level or if it fails to receive expected grants beyond the reduction of a grade level, which will have a cascading effect on several other areas of the application. Response. This statement is misleading. We provided a letter from Charter School Capital for a receivable sales loan available on July 1st for the cost of expenses from July to October of year 1. Either this is an acceptable practice or an unacceptable practice. Not only did we provide a contingency plan to the budget narrative, we also stated in the interview to continue the loan from 12 to 18 months or longer through a wind-down option if the CSP grant is not available. This is standard protocol for new charter schools. Sincerely, the Ivy Prep Academy founding team. That concludes the statement. Thanks, Sarah.
Now I'm going to ask if there are any comments or questions from board members before we move into a vote.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
For the staff, with this appeals process, I understand that we aren't able to interface with applicants as we might normally do. In-person, hearings in person, interviews in person. And I just want to just understand that with the challenges that we're facing in that regard, that we're not handicapped in any way from being able to glean fully information, responses, perspective, or anything like that as we determine our position on these items and make recommendations. So I'm really just wanting to make sure that we're not, that nothing's getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak, with regard to our ability to effectively evaluate even in the midst of the current environment.
Yeah, Daryl, this is Sarah. I appreciate that question. I'll certainly defer to my team who has had more back and forth with our sponsors in this appeal cycle than I have, but we have done everything in our power to ensure that we are getting as much information as we always do in this appeal process. We've had very good engagement, extensive conversations with the sponsor and the LEA as part of the public hearing and the capacity interviews and the other components of the review process that typically happen in person. We also have the ability, like we always do, to go back after the public hearing, after the capacity interview, and follow up over email with additional questions that might have surfaced that we need additional clarifying information to help us wrap our heads around. So I don't feel like we have had any kind of blind spots, but obviously, the hallway chatter, the elevator kind of conversations, we haven't had those informal interactions like we might. But other than that, I do think the process has been standard as usual, and I do feel like we've been able to get complete information, but I would certainly defer to my team if you all have other things you'd like to share in terms of how this has been handled during the public health crisis.
I would agree. I think the key difference here is that we were speaking over video as opposed to live in person, but everything else was pretty much run exactly the same. I think the one thing that was different as part of the public hearing is that rather than having people present in person their comments, we accepted those in advance, just as we normally would ask people to sign up in advance. And I read them on the record rather than the individual who submitted the comments. That was really the only difference in our process. We collected written comments for a week after, just the same as we normally would, and all the other parts of our process ran as smoothly as they do when they're in person.
Any follow-up to that, Daryl? I think it's important to say this as a board member, and I'm only speaking for myself, is that the process, and everybody on the board I know from conversations in the past, we take each one of these so deeply seriously, and Sarah said that at the beginning of her remarks, and it's always troubling to us one way or the other when we are not in a position to approve based on the factors that are presented before us. And we have an opportunity to look at all of the materials, everything that is collected by our team. And we have an opportunity to sit in live or after the fact on the hearings. And so with that being said, every decision is treated as fair and equitably as we possibly can. And no one wants to deny a new charter coming into an area where all of the evidence points in that direction. And we all witnessed the passion of the charter team from Ivy Prep Academy. And so it's evident, and they will be successful whether we vote yay or nay today. The passion, it will override eventually, and I think all of the ducks will be in a row. And I think they'll be in a better position in the future if for some reason the decision is to uphold the decision of the LEA. So I just wanted to say that because it's when we don't say a lot of things during these meetings, it can often be misunderstood that our silence means we are just blindly accepting or we've not dug in and investigated all these things ourselves because we take this so incredibly seriously. And so I want to make sure that I said that for myself, and I believe that most of the board members are of like mind just because of other conversations on other board meetings. But I'll stop and see if there are any other comments or questions from other board members.
Madam Chair, this is Gordon. I appreciate your comments and certainly share your thoughts. As we read through the various documents, both for and against, it does kind of weigh heavily on myself in terms of the decisions that we're making here. One question that I do have for Sarah on this one, just not knowing the timing of when certain decisions are being made, but Sarah, is there anything in this document that was just shared with us? It was very specific and to the point, counterpoint, but was there anything in there that would sway your recommendation?
This was as you know, response to my recommendation. So we just received it, I believe, on Friday or over the weekend. It hasn't been that long that we've had to review it. But I still stand by my recommendation at this time. I think that's always sort of the qualifying statement, as I mentioned, in making my recommendation. I have a lot of faith in these sponsors that they, again, have the expertise and talent and passion to open a successful school to serve the families of North Nashville. But at this time, looking at the merits of the application and some of the nuts and bolts that for us as an appellate body, and again, I think it's a slightly higher standard as an appellate body to overturn a local decision in this case, I think there is more work to be done on some of the plans that we'd like to see before I would be comfortable recommending for approval. Not that they can't get there, but at this time, I think the application still needs a bit more work to be ready to open in the ensuing school year. That's, I think, the other thing to realize here is that they're not proposing to delay a year, but they are proposing to open next school year. And so for that reason, it felt like plans were coming together, but in some cases not fully developed at the level that, again, would lead me to recommend for approval at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Is there a motion to approve?
This is Gordon. I make a motion to approve the executive director's recommendation.
And that is to uphold the decision of Metro Nashville Public Schools.
Correct.
Is there a second? Mr. Ferguson provides the motion. Is there a second?
This is Nick. I second.
Mr. Darnell provides the second. Any further discussion or comments? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Mr. Darnell,
Aye.
Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson,
Aye.
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 and ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3C, KIPP Antioch College Prep High School Appeal.
The third appeal for discussion and vote today is for KIPP Antioch College Prep High School, a proposed high school opening with grade 9 for school year 23-24 in Southeast Nashville. The review committee recommended approval of this application because the application met the standard in each section of the rubric. The sponsor demonstrated a need within the selected community and has a strong academic plan with proven results, including a robust plan to serve and support its large English learner population. The sponsor has an experienced governing board and leadership team that is well-versed in expansion and understands how to mitigate risks when it comes to growing the network. The startup and facilities plans also demonstrated the network's significant experience by providing a clear plan for human capital and its facilities. Additionally, the sponsor's network is in good fiscal health with significant cash reserves and strong audits, as well as an established record of academic performance, which shows that its schools regularly perform above the district and state averages on TN Ready and the ACT. This appeal was unique in that the denial of the amended application by Metro Nashville's Board of Education was in part because of substantial negative fiscal impact under TCA 4913-108C, therefore triggering State Board staff to conduct an in-depth analysis using documentation submitted by MNPS. It's important to note that, as stated in State Board Rule 0520-14-01-.02, when a local school district has denied a charter school application on the basis of substantial negative fiscal impact, the burden is on the district to establish that substantial negative fiscal impact exists, such that approval of the charter school would be contrary to the best interest of the students, the school district, or community. After a thorough review of the documentation and data provided by MNPS in support of its argument, we found that MNPS did not prove that the approval of the high school application would present a substantial negative fiscal impact on the district. With this, Dr. Morrison was able to focus on the review committee's recommendation and the information gathered on the other parts of our appeal process to make her recommendation. Dr. Morrison?
Thank you, Ellie. As our board members know, having approved 2 schools in the Antioch community with KIPP Nashville, we've gotten to know this operator well over the last 5 years as they partnered with us in opening those 2 schools in Antioch. Through that partnership, we've gotten to know the school and network leaders very well who are doing incredible work to deliver an excellent education for the students and families in that area of Nashville. And this school, like the KIPP Elementary School and Middle School before it, seeks to locate in an area of town, as Allie mentioned, that's growing rapidly, that's in need of additional school options. And in approving the school, we would be helping KIPP to complete the pipeline K-12 for these families. So I do agree with the review committee's assessment of the many strengths this applicant brings in this latest petition to open a high school in the Antioch community. And for that reason, I'm recommending it for approval without reservation. In this case, and Angie, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we have a statement from the sponsor or the local district. So if we do not have any statements, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back over to you for discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any comments or questions from board members regarding this particular appeal? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve or to accept Dr. Morrison's recommendation to overturn the decision of MNPS?
Approved. Or so moved. Sorry, so moved.
Okay. Mr. Morrow provides the motion. Is there a second? second. Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Eby?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards? Mr. Ferguson?
Aye.
Ms. Kim?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Now moving to item 3D, Memphis School of Excellence Appeal.
The application for Memphis School of Excellence Cordova comes from an experienced operator in Shelby County and proposes to open a 6 through 12 middle and high school in the Cordova neighborhood, beginning with grades 6 through 9 in August 2021. While, like all of the appeals we're discussing today, there were definite strengths noted in the review committee's assessment of the amended application. However, the committee ultimately recommended denial of the application, scoring the academic, operational, and performance record sections as partially meets the standard, and the financial section as meets the standard. Specifically, the sponsor failed to establish a need in the proposed community for a middle school. The review committee noted that there is a need for a high school in the community. However, this sponsor is proposing to open a combined middle and high, and currently the existing middle schools in Cordova are under-enrolled. Additionally, the sponsor has seen mixed results in student proficiency rates and its growth data that differs by grade level and subject, and at times is on par with Shelby County. Furthermore, with regard to its middle school math growth, the sponsor has earned a TVOS level 1 and 2 over the last few years. It's important to note that the committee's analysis was limited to the most recent TN data, which is 2018-19, due to the cancellation of state testing for 19-20. Additionally, while the sponsor has an established and experienced governing board, the sponsor's network is currently experiencing rapid growth with the opening of its first school in the Cordova neighborhood at the start of this 2021 school year. The review committee found a lack of compelling evidence that the network has the capacity to open a second school in that neighborhood in less than a year, given the significant under-enrollment across the existing middle schools and the intensive effort needed to make the recruitment goals while its newest school is in its first year in operation, and many challenges may have yet to be seen. The review committee noted that the sponsor's financial plan was strong due to the network's sustained history of financial health, had a sound contingency plan, and a healthy cash balance to weather the uncertainty of the unfolding pandemic. The sponsor also presented evidence of additional grants that the network has received since writing the application. So while this section showcased the network's experience and true strengths, the review committee found that the remaining sections fell short of the required criteria in the rubric and therefore did not recommend the application for approval. Dr. Morrison?
Yeah, Allie, just a couple additional comments that fed into my recommendation. As Allie mentioned, Memphis School of Excellence is a known operator in the Shelby County community, and they've proven that they can successfully operate schools that deliver high-quality options for children in the Cordova community specifically. I do believe there is a demand, much like we saw with KIPP, from the existing MSC families to extend the school's footprint into the middle school and high school grades in order to serve grades K-12 in this area of Memphis. In the public hearing, they detailed important changes that they've made to the staffing and instructional models, in part to address the mixed middle school level results from 2018-19. But as Allie said, unfortunately, due to the school closures and cancellation of state tests last spring, we don't have any additional data to review and ultimately evaluating the success of these adjustments. Still, their existing high school is strong. They graduate and matriculate students at very high rates. And given the current conditions resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, we know more and more families are in search of strong options for their students. Specifically, as part of the public hearing and the ensuing public comments that we received at our office, we heard from upwards of 58 parents, families, and community members who were in support of this new school. I do think that is notable in terms of establishing demand. For all of these reasons, coupled with what you've heard about the review committee's lingering questions, I feel like the best recommendation in this case is a neutral one. We'll hear statements now both from the applicant and Shelby County, and then I look forward to the discussion of this appeal. Angie, I'll turn it over to you first, though, for the statements from our sponsor and LEA.
So I'll start again with the statement from Shelby County first. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before the State Board of Education's hearing committee and showcase Shelby County Schools' quality authorization process. We respectfully acknowledge that decisions are hard in these circumstances and appreciate our response being taken into account. We are confident that approving only schools that demonstrate a strong capacity to establish and operate a quality charter school, combined with supporting our current portfolio, is how we will achieve our strategic goal of overseeing a charter sector that performs in the top 25% of the state. We felt that Memphis School of Excellence Cordova 6 through 12 could not demonstrate a need for a new school program in the Cordova neighborhood. Currently, the middle school grade band in the Cordova area is severely under-enrolled. We've seen under-enrollment affect schools within our charter portfolio, including as a root reason for closure. We want our schools to be successful, and although we know that students may come from different areas, addressing the 85 needed seats in the high school grade band did not justify adding to the almost 2,000 empty seats in the Cordova middle school grade band at this time. In addition to analyzing the need for seats in a proposed region for a new charter, we have to look to a school's performance to make a decision for the good of the community. In the TDOE rubric, it says an applicant must provide clear, compelling evidence of successful student outcomes for each school in the network and evidence that the operator schools are high-performing and successful by meeting state standards and national standards. While the network has performed at high academic levels compared to other middle and high schools in the SCS district, we also expect that an existing operator can show they've consistently moved the needle in proficiency and growth when compared to other schools in Shelby County, as well as state and nationwide achievement measures. Memphis School of Excellence Cordova 6 through 12 was unable to effectively show that they would meet performance targets when compared to schools outside of Shelby County. Based on our analysis of all of the components submitted by Memphis School of Excellence in both the initial and amended round of this application cycle, we did not believe there was a compelling case to open a 6 through 12 school in Cordova at this time. We also feel that if the evidence isn't clear enough in the amended application or public hearing for a recommendation from the executive director, the state board should support the decision of the local governing authority after a full discussion of the evidence presented in all aspects of the appeal process. Shelby County supports that the state board will uphold the local recommendation of denying a charter for MSE at this time. We support our schools and know that the State Board and Administrative Office have the best interest for all Tennessee students in mind. We hope that you will carefully consider the depth at which our review team analyzed each application and make a decision that supports quality and equitable opportunities for students in our Memphis community. That concludes the Shelby County statement. I'll now move to the statement from Memphis School of Excellence. To the State Board, we are appreciative of the time and consideration the State Board has given to Memphis School of Excellence's application to open a grade 6 through 12 charter school in the Cordova area. MSE, since its inception in 2010, has worked diligently to provide its students with outstanding educational opportunities that puts them on a path to college and lifelong success and to build strong and meaningful relationships with the families and stakeholders in the communities we serve. These efforts have led to much success over the past decade, as evidenced by our consistently strong academic growth TVOS scores each year. Our high scores on Shelby County Schools Performance Scorecard, which is the most comprehensive assessment of a school's academic program and climate, our 100% annual graduation rates, and our college matriculation rates that near 90% annually. As students stay with us through elementary, middle, and high school, they are leaving us well prepared and with compelling opportunities in the next stages of their lives. What's more, we've established a school environment that has led to some of the highest teacher and student retention rates among all public schools in Shelby County. We understand and appreciate that this is critical for maintaining consistently high outcomes for students. While all organizations that strive for excellence, we recognize there are areas in which we can always improve. At the middle school level, we have strengthened our curricular program and resources, strategically added more robust instructional coaching supports, expanded professional development opportunities for our teachers, particularly in STEM and technology, and continue to invest in data analysis and assessment systems. All of these efforts are to ensure our students have the mathematical and literacy skills and knowledge to be successful in high school and college. Because we have taken on many new students each year at the middle school level, nearly 40% each year, absolute proficiency scores do not tell the whole story. We know we are on the right path as we look at our high growth scores each year that illustrate students come to us are making strong progress. And our internal NWEA MAP testing, in which 60% of our students are meeting their growth targets. As we seek to open a grade 6 through 12 charter school in Cordova, we have also made targeted investments in our network team with key director level hires in academics, SPED, ELL, finance, and operations. We have already seen these investments pay off through the recent successful opening of our elementary school in Cordova, in which we received more than 350 applications for 190 spots in a very challenging environment. We are confident that the experience and skill set of our network leadership team, coupled with these new hires, we are fully ready to open a 6 through 12 school at our Cordova campus. Our board of directors has also been instrumental in our success over the past decade and in getting us to a place where we are ready to further expand. While the board comprises just 6 members, this has been a tight-knit group of accomplished educators who have been deeply invested in MSE over a meaningful period of time. Throughout these past few years, which have seen the growth of MSE, they have continued to skillfully carry on key committee work that touches all aspects of our organization and have provided critical oversight of the executive director and the programming at MSE. While the capacity interview did not provide an opportunity to deeply dive into the inner workings of the board members of MSE have consistently played an integral role in the oversight of the organization, as well as in providing the much-needed thought partnership to the MSE leadership team. While we acknowledge there are some Cordova middle schools that are under-enrolled, these schools have also underperformed in past years, as illustrated by low TVOS scores, as well as low scores on the SDS performance scorecard, and are very large school settings in which personalized attention with students is very difficult. Not only would MSE offer a higher quality education academic program with higher high school graduation and college matriculation rates, but it would also provide a smaller school option with STEM and technology programming that equips students with critical career-ready skills. We believe this will be a compelling option for many students and families in the Cordova area. We again appreciate the consideration provided by the State Board and the opportunity to present to you and humbly ask that you approve our application to open a grade 6 through 12 charter school in Cordova. And that concludes the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders and Dr. Morrison. Here is the charge before us as board members. So based on the information provided to the State Board, with the documents from the LEA, the recordings of the hearing, the de novo review, the recommendations from the State Board review team, and the additional information provided by Dr. Morrison, we must determine if we will uphold the decision of Shelby County Schools or overturn their denial. Through the discussion, and please let me hear your name so I can acknowledge you for your comments and questions.
Madam Chair, this is Bob Eby.
Yes, Mr. Eby.
Not knowing if I was going to be here today, I prepared a statement, which I think would be easy to say if I just read that.
Okay.
So as stated by the Executive Director, the State Board Review Committee did recommend denial of the application for MSE because of the sponsor failed to establish compelling evidence demonstrating both a need in the proposed community for a middle school and strong performance management with clear academic goals. Furthermore, the review committee did not find evidence of strong oversight and governance by the governing board of the capacity to open a second school in the Cordova area. Finally, the review committee did not find evidence of compelling academic performance data that merits replication of the sponsor's middle school model. Also, MSE did not present clear evidence of a demonstrated need in the intended community of Cordova, specifically for a middle school, and evidence provided that the current middle schools in the area are under-enrolled. That is, there may not be a need for an additional school. However, for MSE, there's a clear track record of success at the high school level, yet there was a lack of evidence that MSE will provide a high-quality school option based on the academic data available for the network's current middle school. And unfortunately, there was a lack of evidence to evaluate any program improvements by the network because of the lack of state assessment data from 2019 and 2020. Specifically, the sponsor is an existing operator within Shelby County Schools and has an outstanding track record of success at the high school level. They've increased the average ACT score from 13.8 in 2014 to 18.6 in 2019, which is above the Shelby County School ACT average. And the high school has a very high graduation rate, and the network provided data to show that 89% of the high school graduating class in 2019 matriculated to post-secondary institutions. Moreover, the sponsor consistently performed well on the SCS-SDF ranking in the top 15%. It is unfortunate because of COVID, we do not have additional middle school performance data. And additional data may change my mind. However, having served on the local board of education for 16 years, as Sarah said, I'm keenly aware that we as a board should not take lightly overturning a local board's decision, particularly when we're missing key information that may affect the future student learning. And that, coupled with our own review committee's review recommendation and the lack of a capacity need, I cannot support at this time overturning the Shelby County Board of Education denial of authorizing the school. However, because the sponsor does have significant success at the high school level, I would encourage them to not end their goal to have a middle school in the area and to not hesitate to reapply when additional data is available. That ends my statement. Thank you.
Just for clarification, Bob, thank you for the comments. Did you mean to say a high school instead of a middle school? Because the high school is what is needed, but you said a middle school. To reapply.
Yeah, the middle school. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. To say high school. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you for that. Other comments from board members?
Daryl Cobbins.
Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
Thank you. Just from my reading and observation, this appears to be a quality operator. And I think if we listen to the statement that was read by Shelby County, they actually, in some ways, affirm that themselves, saying that this operator's middle and high schools rank very high in their existing portfolio of middle and high schools. I think context is very important here as we look at this decision, because from my assessment, the high school in the Cordova area is reported to be over capacity, but it's also a low-performing high school. And the middle schools in Cordova, 3 from what I've read, by and large are under-enrolled, but also have performance issues themselves. And so as I read through this information, I wondered, is the reason for that under-enrollment because those schools have a record of low performance? And so I factor that into my thought process. And so what that tells me is that in Cordova, there is not a quality option for students or parents in choosing middle or high school to choose from. And so as we talk about the lack of performance data for the most recent school year, I think if we're being consistent in evaluating circumstances beyond the control of the operator, similarly, as we've done in one of the decisions that we made earlier today relative to the rubric, the lack of performance data should not count against the operator. I think that particular issue is something that should be set aside since it's beyond their control. And so the fact that Memphis School of Excellence has consistently ranked in the top 20% of middle and high schools in Shelby County. The fact that it has a high post-secondary matriculation rate among its graduates. The fact that it has a 350 student waiting list for its school in the Cordova area. And the fact that it has made enhancements to its staff, training, and other mechanisms that were recommended that they put in place when they applied previously. I think the parents and students and families in Cordova deserve a quality option. And I think that the track record of this particular operator shows that they can start, manage, and operate a quality charter school. And some of the points made by the committee and our staff, by my interpretation, whether that's relative to the board or questioning the school's ability to juggle the multiple priorities, fall back, just from my estimation, onto hypothetical scenarios that we don't know the answer to. And so based on the information that is available to us and based upon my interpretation of those facts, I believe that it's in the best interest of the community of Cordova. It's in the best interest of the students and families in Cordova that they have an alternative to the institutions that are there now who are not performing at a high level. And so I'm inclined to overturn the decision of Shelby County Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Cobbins. Appreciate your comments. Now, are there other comments or any questions from board members?
Yeah, I have. This is Nate. I have a question just on, do we know the impact of any of the non-public schools have had? Is it a population? Is it a lack of choices? I know evangelical Christian schools in that area. Just do we have any impact of the non-publics there as well for a reason for the under populated middle schools?
Refer that to my team. That's not something that I know off the top of my head, but Allie, Tess, Angie, please, or Daryl or Larry are Memphis members too. If you have additional insight, feel free to share.
This is Tess Stovall, Director of Charter Schools for the State Board of Education. So one of the points that the applicant made in the application was that their enrollment projections were based on the plan to pull some students from private schools in the Cordova area. Beyond their statement and their description of the private schools in the area and their plan that they feel like they would be an option, that was the extent of the evidence provided in the application to support their enrollment projections.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked that is just as I think Mr. Cobbins, Mr. Eby both are looking at it, differently, but in the same way. I mean, is it a population, there's not enough kids, or is it there a lack of options? And if there were better options, those schools that perform the best would be a draw for those kids. And so I think, as I look at the last 6 months in education, options matter. Choices in education matter. The ability to, as a parent, to make decisions about what is going to be the best choice for your child, I think matters. And so in areas, and so I guess I was just trying to find a way to think through the difference between a lack of options or a lack of quality options and sort of trying to parse that out. Whereas, if there's plenty of options, but they're not good options, those aren't really options. And if there are plenty of good options, then that's a different thing. I was just trying to think through the difference in those two things and wondered if the staff had any thoughts specific to that.
respond to that, again, this is Tess Stovall. Based on the description in the application, it appears that there are several private school options in the Cordova area that the applicant provided detail on. They did say that they wanted to provide an option that was at no cost to families who might not be able to afford that private school option. I do think that when it comes to, again, kind of the middle school performance, the review committee had concerns that the current performance of the middle school that this operator operates there were some areas where the operator does outperform the existing middle schools in Cordova. There are some areas where it does not. And so thinking about, would parents opt into this option? Again, I think that what we were seeing was there was some mixed data to analyze such that, the review committee felt like it couldn't give a full positive recommendation that we could guarantee that it would outperform the current middle schools based on the totality of the information that we had at our disposal.
Okay.
Kelly Gaffey, Deputy Director of Charter Schools. I will add as well that Shelby County produces a regional neighborhood analysis in which they provide data on the need, and they actually divide it into two different categories. So the need is based on capacity or seats available, and then a second data point based on school performance. And so with regard to the middle school grade bands, Shelby County stated that they need about 1,000 seats based on capacity. They're under-enrolled. But based on school performance, they need about 769 more seats. And then with the high school, similarly, based on capacity alone, the neighborhood needs 85 seats, but based on school performance, they need over 2,000 more seats. So Shelby County themselves are recognizing that they have more than a majority of their schools are underperforming compared to their own performance framework.
Allie, so just to be clear, the 2,000 more seats that are needed, is that across the entire county?
One neighborhood.
One neighborhood. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Larry.
Yes, Mr. Jensen.
It seems to me that, in one sense, this middle school is a means to an end, and that end is a good high school in that area by providing a good middle school. I keep thinking about that sixth grader that's in Delta now, or Memphis School of Excellence now, and what's going to happen to them if we, in fact, agree with Shelby County Schools. And that outcome to me, if they're in a good situation and they're growing, it seems to me that there's some necessity that we think about that if those middle school options are not that good, we're taking them out of a good elementary and moving them into a poor or less than stellar middle school and hope that they get to high school. Because as I understand it, the purpose here is to build this thing from 6 to 12 over a period of years, and we certainly want them to do it, in a logical and reasonable manner. And so for that reason, I really hesitate to agree with Shelby County Schools on this.
Thank you for those comments. Do we have others? All of the comments are certainly well taken, and if we do not have additional comments, it is time to ask if there is a motion.
Madam Chair.
And that would be, and Carol, I'm sorry, that would either be to uphold the decision or overturn the decision. Yes, Mr. Robbins.
Move that we overturn the decision of Shelby County Schools.
We have a motion to overturn. Do we have a second? Provided by, by Mr. Robbins. Do we have a second?
Larry Jensen, second.
The second. Is there additional discussion?
Madam Chair, this is Elisa.
Kim.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you to all the staff for such a well put together packet as a pre-read. And thank you also to Mr. Cobbins. Larry, thank you so much for the additional color and insight. I was deeply interested in your perspectives in particular. I found the inputs quite helpful.
And I echo that sentiment, so thank you for saying that, Ms. Kim. Any other questions or comments before we have a roll call vote? Thank you. Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Commons.
Aye.
No. Mr. Edwards. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Ms. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow. Hargrove.
Aye. Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 7 ayes and 3 no.
So we do have a majority, and with that, we do approve the motion to approve, actually to overturn the decision of Shelby County Schools. Thank you. Now we are going to move into the next item on the agenda, which is item 3E, Nashville Collegiate Prep Appeal.
Thank you. The final appeal for discussion and vote today is for Nashville Collegiate Prep, a K-8 school proposing to open in August 2021, beginning with grades K through 5 in Southeast Nashville. The review committee recommended denial of the amended application because all 3 sections of the application received a rating of partially meets the standard. Beginning with the academic section, the review committee found that the sponsor did not demonstrate enough evidence of interest from parents and families in the community to support its plan to open with 470 students in grades K through 5 in year 1, particularly in a community where the current schools are under-enrolled. Not meeting this enrollment projection would negatively impact several other areas of the sponsor's plan, including staffing, facilities, and its operating budget. With regard to the operations plan, the review committee cited concerns with the small size of the governing board, currently 4 members, and their capacity to provide adequate oversight of their selected CMO. So the committee did acknowledge that the addition of a 4th member during the appeal process could be a strong one, as she is a parent and resident within its proposed community. The committee also had concerns about the recruitment plan, as it requires the school to hire 22 general education teachers with an English as a second language endorsement in year 1 alone. The applicant suggested that they would cover the cost of their teachers gaining their EL endorsement using a stipend included within the budget. However, this stipend was insufficient in itself to cover the full cost, along with additional items that the sponsor tagged within the budget to be paid for with the stipend as well. Furthermore, the review committee did not find sufficient evidence that the sponsor would be able to purchase all necessary equipment for the beginning of the school year based on its startup and year 1 revenue projections. For these reasons, the State Board's review committee was unable to recommend approval of the amended application for Nashville Collegiate Prep. Dr. Morrison.
Thanks, Allie. Again, I'll offer just a few more thoughts regarding my recommendation specifically. As Allie noted, this is the 3rd year this applicant has appealed to the State Board of Education, and we have seen over the course of those years a really impressive team come together who are obviously dedicated to opening a strong community-based school for the students and families in Nashville. I also think their plan has continued to evolve in very positive ways. As reflected in the review committee's findings that Allie just detailed, I do wish the application before you was seeking to open with a smaller subset of students, namely because of the challenges that they may face in terms of their staffing model with the EL dual endorsement, which I think is a strong one, but certainly ambitious. However, it does seem likely that this team of committed education professionals is prepared to support this school across the academic, operational, and financial areas necessary for success. We're also in a time, again, as we noted before, where families are more in search of strong school options than ever. And finally, Nashville Collegiate Prep has partnered with an existing CMO, Noble Education Initiative, who has recently begun managing schools in Nashville and has experience doing so in other states as well. We learned at the public hearing that the sponsor is also intent on adding additional board members, which was one of the review committee's concerns that Allie just detailed. However, given some of those lingering questions that Allie has described in her summary report from the review committee, my recommendation for this applicant is again neutral, and Angie will read statements. I think she has a statement from the sponsor in this case before we open it up for discussion. Angie, I'll turn it over to you.
Morrison. So this is a statement from Nashville Collegiate Prep. Dear Chairwoman Hartgrove and members of the Tennessee State Board of Education, thank you for the opportunity to respond as you consider the appeal for Nashville Collegiate Prep, or NCP. You have an important decision to make. As you deliberate, we urge you to pay particular attention to Dr. Morrison's findings and recommendations. We have worked for 3 years to deliver a high-quality K-8 school to Southeast Nashville. As Dr. Morrison noted, it is readily apparent that the sponsor is passionate and committed to bringing a unique option to students in Southeast Nashville and has aligned itself with a strong CMO partner in Noble Education Initiative, or NEI. Dr. Morrison recognized this sponsor has made numerous improvements to its application over the past 3 years in response to feedback from both MEMPHIS and the State Board. That work resulted in what Dr. Morrison called a clear mission and vision with an emphasis on social emotional learning, use of a standard-aligned continuous improvement model, a robust assessment cycle to inform personalized learning, and an innovative learning community model. This model is just one of the strengths of NEI, an organization nationally accredited by Cognia, a premier nonprofit accrediting agency that possesses the knowledge to help schools and organizations improve so that all learners have the opportunity they deserve. Cognia is the same entity that accredits school districts across Tennessee. We know from the enrollment and track record of incumbent MMPS schools in Southeast Nashville that NCP is sorely needed. The total population within a 15-minute drive of our projected school location is expected to grow 35% faster than the Tennessee state average and is more than double of the national average over the next 5 years. In the immediate neighborhood, there are 2 nearby MMPS schools enrolling more than 90% capacity and 5 others enrolling more than 80% capacity. Furthermore, only 2 of the 13 schools within a 10-minute drive of the anticipated location earned an achievement score of 3.0 or better in 2018-19, while 8 of those same schools earned below a 2.0. Given this, we were disappointed that MMPS once again refused to recommend NCP's application for approval. We believe Dr. Morrison explained it correctly, noting the district's refusal to grant any charters since 2014 or to follow the quality authorizing standards the State Board has worked so hard to promulgate and enforce. This evident bias explains issues that arose in the details of our application's review, such as a criticism that we would not be able to hire 22 dual certified teachers in our first year, when page 97 of our application states we intend to staff 6 EL teachers, 1 per grade level in year 1. As Dr. Morrison stated, the sponsor has outlined a plan to cover tuition costs necessary to have teachers gain an EL endorsement, and we are providing $15,000 in stipends in year 1. In addition, our startup budget projection was cited as a concern this year, despite the fact that the exact same projections were determined to meet or exceed standards in our previous application, which is the reason these projections were unchanged. Finally, we credit Dr. Morrison's observations with respect to our board growth and depth, and that we have, in Dr. Morrison's words, added a 4th member to the board from the identified school community who is a former educator and parent, and partnered with an established CMO who has experience operating schools in the same community. All of our board members are high-capacity leaders excited to be engaged in K-12 public education. Our organizational structure provides an additional layer of oversight and accountability by having an independent board oversee another nonprofit entity. Moreover, as president of Trevecca Nazarene University, I oversee an annual budget of $70 million. And we are proud that we have graduated nearly 1,000 certified and qualified educators over the past 5 years to support Tennessee public schools. We urge you to embrace Dr. Morrison's recognition that there are sometimes significant factors outside of the review committee that are important to consider when analyzing the best interests of students, school district, and the community. Dr. Morrison did observe many notable strengths in the NCP application and also acknowledges that the current pandemic has created even more urgency around families' access to quality options for their children. And while some K-8 district schools in NCP's target community are under capacity, they are also underperforming. NCP is a school you want in your neighborhood. Communities and families deserve more quality K-8 school options, especially now during this unprecedented time. They deserve passionate and committed individuals who will listen, serve their community, and serve the academic and social emotional needs of their children. NCP will meet this need through the use of a standards-aligned continuous improvement model, personalized instruction, an emphasis on social emotional learning, and an innovative learning community model. It is a school you can be proud to authorize by voting yes today. Thank you for your support of NCP and for your service to students throughout Tennessee. Sincerely, Dr. Dan Boone. I'll turn it back over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. That's all we have. We'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair, actually, for discussion. Happy to answer any questions that members have about this applicant.
Thank you, and I do want to remind the board members that the responsibility entrusted to us is the same as the one I cited to you when we were voting, making our determination on item 3D, the Memphis School of Excellence. So with that being said, the decision to uphold or overturn is upon us. Are there comments or let me just say it like this. Let's move into discussion and hear what you as individual board members want to share at this point in time.
Madam Chair, this is Bob Eby. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Eby, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm not going to read what I presented before, but had put together, but let me just hit a couple of high points. My recommendation here is our recommendations must be based on what's best for the student, the LEA, or the community. And so I look and focus on the student. And just much like the last vote was to provide a school for improved opportunity, I think this in the Nashville is an opportunity to provide a school that gives the students a better opportunity for success. And this is a third application from the sponsor. Each one of those have gotten better. Our committee review states that the academic sections has strengths. The other thing is it's working toward, I think, much more at-risk students. Show the student population will consist of 9% higher minority population, 34% higher EL population. And I think that will offer the opportunity to continue to address a critical demographic. I unfortunately am running to the plane right now, and I'm probably going to get disconnected when I go outside, but I'll try to reconnect. But I do believe that this decision is not a straightforward.
Thank you, Mr. Eby, and we just lost you, so we'll hope you'll join us again. Other questions or comments?
I'd just like to pick up where Bob left off or really echo his sentiments here. I respect this group for the way that they're showing in terms of really trying to show improvement over the last few times that they've try to secure this approval. I think that just the population growth alone in this area and the need for a choice here, I think, plays into this decision.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Other comments?
Question. Having not been here previously, for the other two, I guess, I was just curious. They've been denied on appeal 2 times before. Is that correct?
Larry, this is Sarah. That's correct. And Tess, I don't know if you want to add any additional insight there, because the application has changed as the letter that they submitted indicated over the course of the 2 years, I think in very positive ways, but it's changed significantly since the first year.
So, well, that is correct. They have evolved their application, They're drilling in Davy Crockett right now. So Allie, I don't know if you from a non-drilling perspective can provide more color commentary, but they have evolved their application over the last 3 years. They have taken some of the feedback that's been provided to them to amend their application. I think what you're seeing from the review committee is remaining concerns regarding the ambitious start plan of K through 5 and nearly 500 students in year 1. That is, I would say, relatively atypical when we're looking at new start applicants. And so I think what you're seeing in terms of the review committee's recommendation is reservations with regard to that startup plan and capacity to execute such an ambitious year 1 enrollment target.
Okay. Did I also hear you said that the Nashville schools have not approved a new charter in years? Is that correct?
It's 2014 or 2015. I didn't hear the date that you said, Larry, but we have, during that period, we've approved charter schools, but not approved charter schools for at least 5 years.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Hearing none, a motion, one way or the other, to uphold or to overturn.
Madam Chair, this is Mike Edwards. I'd like to make a motion to uphold, to overturn Nashville's
motion to overturn the decision in MEMPHIS by Mr. Mike Edwards. Is there a second?
Nate Morrow, I second it.
Static in the line. I believe that was Mr. Morrow that made this second. Thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Yes.
Elisa?
Yes, Elisa.
Oh, thank you. So excellent points have already been made, so I won't repeat those. I do think I'm encouraged by this applicant's persistence and willingness to evolve in response to feedback, and I'm quite hopeful that they could in fact make a significant impact within a population that I think deserves and needs more choice. And so with that said, I reckon the greatest hesitation for me is the K through 5 plan, which, as noted, strikes me as very operationally ambitious, very capital V. And I recognize that there's, it is what it is. We need to approve or we don't approve K5. I would say, however, given that where we stand as a community, a country, where I think more than ever educational opportunity is an ever more elusive reality for too many kids, and I don't see the pandemic helping in this regard for a very long time. I'm inclined to move forward with a yay. I would, though, very much hope that the operator would consider perhaps starting out with a less ambitious operational plan so that they may guarantee themselves success very early on, get a strong foothold, some wins, maybe on a K1, K2 plan. Obviously, I understand that they can move forward with K5 regardless, because that is what we're discussing and voting on, but I wanted to get that into the record.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments or discussion? I will add that someone from Indiana reached out to me. They have done a lot of work in Indiana in their school system with Noble Education Initiative, and they provide glowing comments and remarks regarding the success of Noble Education Initiative in Indiana. I just want to put that out on the record, just so you all are aware. They have an excellent reputation in one state. I cannot speak to any other experiences that they have had across other states, but I just wanted to add that. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you all very much for this very deep and important discussion regarding these 5 charters. I know we are already over time, but we do have additional items to move into. But yes, someone speaking?
Yes, ma'am, this is Mike Edwards. So,
yes,
I'm going to ask, with great apologies, I would kind of like to change my vote on 3D, which, is there a mechanism by which I can do that, or is the gavel dropped?
Chair,
I'm going to turn to our parliamentarian, Mr. Nathan James.
since the changing of the vote does not change the outcome, members are within their prerogative to change their vote after the fact.
So effectively, with your comments, then we are changing your vote on item 3E, correct? No. 3B? 3B, as in boy? Okay.
As in dog, D-O-G.
Yes, 3D, because we're about to vote. I'm sorry, we're finished. I apologize. I think I need a quick 5-minute break. I hope that you all will indulge me with that. We have a lot more to cover. Yes.
This is Bob Eby. I'm going to change my vote on 3D also. I think Daryl brought up some very good points.
Okay, we have another change from Mr. Eby.
And Madam Chair, I'm not going to be the lone wolf. I will change as well.
It sounds like we now have a unanimous 100% all members in favor of the motion for item 3D. Okay, is anybody opposed to taking a quick 5-minute break? Because we have a few more items to cover, our action items on final reading. And let's be back here at 12:47. Thank you. Be right back. It's 12:47. We are reconvening. Do we have everybody here? Let's do a quick check. Looks like everybody's here as far as I can tell. Okay. Moving into item 4, action items on final reading. The first item is A, professional assessments for Tennessee Education Policy 5.105. I believe Michael Durline is going to present that item.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. This item is final reading of the Professional Assessments Policy 5.105. And as you all voted on back in July, it recommends assessment requirement pathways for a new 610 math endorsement. Also recommends delay of the increase in EdTPA cut scores. And finally, since first reading, we've added some language that recommends flexibility regarding the pedagogical assessment requirement in certain circumstances. We've heard feedback from many EPPs as they navigate specific health and logistical challenges that could have an impact on successful EdTPA completion. Specifically, this would require that EPPs submit verification at the candidate level that certain health and logistical challenges were faced, and that this would allow the individual to submit qualifying scores on the PLT assessment. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Durline? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Edwards, I move to approve.
Mr. Edwards provides the motion. Is there a second?
Larry Jensen, second.
Provides the second. Last chance for discussion. Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Aye.
Mr. Eby?
He had to catch a call.
Mr. Eby? Okay. All right.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson? Mr. Handy?
Here.
Mr. Hamby, you would reply aye because we're doing a vote.
Apologies. Sorry. Aye.
That's okay.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Morrow? Chairman Hartgrove?
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 8 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Durline. Now moving on to, thank you, item 4B, local education COVID-19 waivers. I believe that's Mr. Jack Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jack Powers. I'm the Director of Policy at the Tennessee Department of Education. I have 2 items for the board's consideration today related to COVID-19 waivers. Chapter 652 of the Public Acts of 2020 granted the Commissioner of Education, upon the authority and approval of the State Board, to waive state statute or rules that inhibit or hinder an LEA's ability or the LEA's goals to comply with the LEA's mission due solely to the outbreak of COVID-19. Basically, the way that we handled this is the department created a form in collaboration with the State Board where districts could either select a waiver from 3 common areas that were identified or to request additional waivers not included in the 3 common areas. And so this first item that I have to present today are the 3 what we've been calling checkbox waivers, where districts could select or request waiver of 3 common areas. The first bullet here related to teacher tenure, the second related to non-renewal, and the third related to State Board training. So again, LEAs were able to simply select which of these 3 waivers they requested, and this item is the Department of Education seeking State Board approval to waive these requirements. And the department recommends approval of this item on first and final reading.
Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Powers? So we really technically have two school systems, Dayton City Schools on the second bullet and Carroll County and Dayton City Schools on the third bullet. Is that correct, Mr. Powers?
Yes, Madam Chair. And in addition, on the spreadsheet that I'm looking at that I just pulled from the publicly posted documents, there's Decatur County Schools.
Decatur?
Which is,
okay.
Yes, ma'am. And Decatur has selected all three of those checkbox waivers.
Thank you.
Waivers that were put out, explain them to me if you don't mind.
Basically what happened was our general counsel's office, in collaboration with the state board and state board staff, identified kind of the three areas that we anticipated all or virtually all LEAs would need to request a waiver. And so these are those three waiver areas.
Okay.
Angie Sanders, General Counsel for the State Board. One additional point I would like to make is that these waivers are specific to the prior 2019-20 school year. So these are not for the school year that we are currently in. This is regarding last year.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve item 4B?
I'll make the motion, but can I ask the question? Is there a time frame by which LEAs are going to be able to make these requests?
Go ahead and answer that, Mike. There was a deadline written into our emergency rules for requests for the 19-20 school year. Those had to be submitted by June 30th. There is not a deadline currently for any requests related to the 2020-21 school year that we are currently in.
I make a motion we approve.
The motion, is there a second?
Second, Darrell Cobbins.
It's the second. Further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Denton. Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow. Chairman Hargrove.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you, Jack. You have the next one, item 4C.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jack Powers again with the Tennessee Department of Education. So if you recall, you all just voted to approve the 3 checkbox waivers. This item is presenting the additional waivers that school districts were asked to request. And one point that I would just like to make is that these waivers, in addition to the 3 checkbox waivers, are all waivers that the board has seen and has voted on before. But as I said, this item includes the additional LEA requested waivers that have been recommended for either approval or denial by the Commissioner of Education. And I would like to mention that these additional waiver requests are grouped by LEA and divided into 3 categories. So the first category, which would be the left-hand column, are waivers recommended for approval. The middle column are waivers that are recommended for conditional approval, meaning there are some specific requirements that the LEA must meet as a condition of receiving the waiver. And then finally, the waivers on the far right column are those that were recommended for denial. And so as I said, these waivers are waivers that the board has seen and voted on previously. And these are waivers that the Commissioner of Education has made a determination on, is seeking board approval. There is one point that I would like to make about a conditionally approved waiver before we proceed, and that is the Tom Cronin Act, which is TCA 49-6-1021E3. We have had many LEAs request a waiver of the entire Tom Cronin Act. And the Tom Cronin Act requires elementary physical education classes to be taught by a licensed and endorsed teacher in PE. And it also requires a certain amount of physical activity time to be provided to elementary students. And the board has voted in the past to just grant a waiver of a portion of the Tom Cronin Act, and that is the portion regarding the requirement for physical education teachers to be licensed and endorsed in PE. And I did want to mention that by granting just a portion of that waiver, what it allows LEAs to then do is to request from the department a 1-year employment standard endorsement waiver for a teacher that is scheduled to teach PE for the 2020-2021 school year. And as I said, the Department of Education recommends approval of this item on first and final reading. And with that, I will take any questions.
And Mr. Powers, to be clear, there are 3 schools that are listed on here asking for these, what we were calling previously, unique waivers. Is that correct? I have Anderson, Dayton City Schools, Sweetwater City Schools. Is that correct, or has anything been added?
Yes, Madam Chair, there has been one other school district, Greenville City Schools, that has been added and should be reflected on the public documentation. And Greenville City Schools requested a waiver from various emergency drills for the 2020-2021 school year. And the recommendation for this waiver is a conditional approval of emergency drills, but only if the entire school is in a full remote learning environment.
So it's nothing new that we have not heard before in previous board meetings where we voted.
That's correct, Madam Chair. Nothing new that you have not previously voted on before.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr.
Jack, let me ask you, let's go back to a lot of districts are asking for a full waiver on Cronin, and they are including a waiver on endorsed phys ed teachers. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Edwards. So we've had many LEAs request a waiver of the entire portion of TCA that outlines the Tom Cronin Act. And the way that I like to think of the Tom Cronin Act is that it's kind of in 2 parts. The first part is the requirement that elementary PE courses be taught by a licensed PE teacher. And the second part deals with the actual physical education time requirements. So the amount of time that each elementary student must spend receiving physical education. And basically what the board has done what the board voted on regarding this waiver is to only waive the portion related to the licensed PE teacher. And so what that means is now if a district would like to staff a teacher in that elementary physical education course who does not hold the correct PE endorsement, they now may request an employment standards endorsement waiver to allow that teacher to staff that class. Importantly, since the requirements in Tom Cronin are in law, previously without the granting of the portion of this waiver, these physical education courses would have been treated similar to a state tested subject area course or a special education course, and the department would not have granted waivers, endorsement area waivers for those courses. But because the board voted to waive that portion of Tom Cronin, LEAs who receive this waiver may now request employment standards endorsement waiver for that portion of the act.
So I never have. This one's always blown my mind when non-EOC the teachers get put in classes they have no endorsement or even knowledge of for a year. They make an application. What do you use to determine whether to grant that application?
So that's an excellent question. And one thing I'll say is that our process in the application for employment standards waivers has changed a little bit historically. And I'm glad that we've got Michael Derline on the call to refer to as needed. And he can correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point in time, regarding the employment standards waivers, we look for college completion, and we look to see that the LEA has that it's a shortage area, and there's been some effort to fill that shortage area. I don't know if there's anything else included there, and like I said, Michael Derline, if he would be called upon, I think could give a more full description of what we've looked for in the past when it comes to these employment standards waivers and what we're now looking for moving forward.
So here is, I would hope that when a district comes and asks for a waiver, it is because they have an absolute dire shortage of that person or that skill, that endorsed area. And that's for a year, and actually they can get an extension, as I understand it, for an additional year, which really gives me heartburn. What I don't understand is, how does COVID impact the Cronin Act? How does it impact getting in the minutes in the week, which I think 60 minutes? More importantly, how does it impact the number of PE teachers you have available? How is it impacting math, and how does it not impact, you get the point.
Sure. And I think that's a good question. One thing I'll say, Mr. Edwards, is that I think that just because of some of the financial constraints that we're seeing right now due to COVID, that's kind of one factor, I believe, that is leading teachers to leading districts to request this waiver. I think the balancing act that we've had to kind of examine is just the time requirements that are in the Tom Cronin Act, in that in the importance that we know is attached to those time requirements to make sure students get the physical activity that they need for a healthy lifestyle. Coupled with that request in the Act, those teachers providing that physical activity time also be properly licensed and endorsed in PE. But to answer your question about what about COVID might make this kind of especially difficult, I would just point back to kind of the staffing and financial side of just making sure that enough PE teachers are hired to staff that required time period.
And before we move beyond this, I do want to call on Amy Owen, who I believe can also provide some insight into this subject matter. She is our policy director on the State Board of Education. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amy Owen, Director of Policy and Research for the State Board. I wanted to provide a quick point of clarification. This waiver is only for the 2020 through 21 school year of this portion of the Cronin Act. You're correct, Mr. Edwards, that typically waivers can be extended for another year or two, but in this case, the waiver is about the Cronin Act and only for this current school year. So we're not going beyond this school year. In addition, this is the way the board voted at its two most recent meetings for other LEAs that have requested this same waiver. So I completely hear your point and understand your concern. I just wanted to share that for consistency, this is the flexibility that the board voted to provide other LEAs at its last two meetings.
Nate Morrow here, just to make sure I'm clear. The waiver is asking just for the suspension of a licensed physical education teacher, but they are not asking for the waiver about time, correct?
Applications were asking for the waiver about time, and when the board first saw this item, I believe in July, with
right.
LEAs asking for the full waiver, the board was more selective and waived only the portion of the licensed educator. And that is what the department is presenting today. They have aligned their recommendations with the board's preference on that.
Great. Okay, just wanted to make sure we were sticking with what we'd already done.
Thank you for that, Ms. Owen. Any other questions or comments before we move into receiving a motion? Is there a motion to approve item 4C?
This is Nick. I so move.
Mr. Darnell provides the motion. Is there a second?
This is Gordon. I'll second.
Mr. Ferguson provides the second. Any further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbin,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards, Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Hamby,
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kim,
Aye.
Mr. Morrow, Chairman Hartgrove,
Aye.
Madam Chairman, I counted 8 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you for that, Mr. Powers. Moving on to item 4D, Basic Education Program Allocations for the fiscal year 2020-21. Ms. Mary Ann Dursky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Mary Ann Dursky, Senior Director of Local Finance at the Department of Education. I'm here today to present the fiscal year 2021 Basic Education Program allocations to districts. These allocations total $4,905,781,000. The allocations this year represent more than $61 million in improvements to the funding spread over the 4 categories of the BEP, which are instructional salaries, instructional benefits, classroom, and non-classroom components. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first and final reading, and the State Board of Education staff concurs with the department's recommendation. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that you or any of the board members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Dursky. Are there questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item 4D?
And I'll move for approval.
Mr. Ferguson provides the motion. Is there a second?
Larry Jensen, second.
Mr. Jensen provides the second.
That's a lot of money.
Please call the roll.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson,
Aye.
Mr. Jensen,
Aye.
Ms. Kim, Mr. Morrow,
Aye.
Chairman Hartgrove,
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 8 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you, Mary Ann Dursky, for your great work. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes with all of our partners as well as our own staff, so thank you to each and every one of you. Now we're going to move into adjournment. Before we do that, we want to call on Dr. Morrison one more time to see if she has any closing remarks and if any of our other board members have closing remarks as well. Dr. Morrison, anything from you? Dr. Morrison, apparently there's no comments. I'll move on. Any other comments from any board members?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
And I don't want a lot of work done on this. I'm just curious, across the districts in the state, how many are back actually in, how many are virtual? And again, I don't want somebody to spend a lot of time. Just, if that's out there, I'd love to hear from that. You know, just by email or something, just out of curiosity.
Madam Chair,
I think that before we do that, I think we need to see, ask our friends at the Department of Education if they could provide that information to us, if they have it at their disposal. and perhaps provide it to us via email rather than waiting for it. I don't know how long it would take to secure that information or how easily it is to secure, but I think it would be great to have that information. So.
I intended by email, just when they can. It's not urgent.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I could address that briefly if you'd like.
Yes, Charlie, I was going to ask you if you would speak to that. Charlie Bufalino?
Well,
sure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I apologize. Mr. Edwards is also trying to speak at the same time. Mr. Edwards, are you trying to say something relative to what Mr. Bufalino is going to speak to now?
We really never know, but in addition to what Larry said, I would like to know not only the districts, but how many kids in Tennessee are learning virtually. You know, a lot of the districts are split, you know, some at home, some. So I think what Larry's asking is great information, and maybe a little more about how many kids are being served by distance learning.
And it's perfectly all right with me that it comes in a couple of days. There's no need to delay the meeting. I just was curious, and unless it's at hand, we can get it by email.
And Charlie, I think that perhaps as much detail as you all have that would show who's hybrid, who's completely online, who's totally in person, just to be clear. So is there anything you want to add before we move on?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I will note, actually, we do have that information for the district level, as Mr. Jensen was asking, readily available through a dashboard website that the Department of Education recently launched. That includes information on the instructional model for each district in the state and how that has varied over time, right? Because some districts have shifted as more and more districts move in person. That is something that's readily available today and is updated on a weekly basis as we get information from districts. So we'd be happy to email that link to your staff to circulate with the board members. The second question that Mr. Edwards had in terms of individual children and some of those numbers, that may take us a little bit more time to gather. As was noted, the approach to school reopening has very much been to most districts have left a remote option available for families to choose from. So even in a scenario in which a district is fully open, in many cases there are individual families that are still learning remotely. But we can certainly get to work on trying to gather some of that information for the board.
And it's also, go ahead, Mike.
Please don't go there. All I was sort of like is to get a sense out of the number of kids in Tennessee, how many of them, and it doesn't have to be a hard number, it can be a swamped percentage that we estimate are learning from home. And I don't want a hard number.
Understood.
One thing that I want to add before we go any further with this, I do know from attending Upper Cumberland Directors Study Council last week that that's a moving target. They may have started with 2,000 students remote, and now they're down to 1,000. Some are struggling to learn remotely in the environment that they're in today. And I'm sure that there's probably similar stories across the board, but I'm hearing that it's a daily shift. And even though they put a date that they more or less cast, not in stone, but put out there to say certain school districts said 6 weeks is your cutoff to make a change from being virtual to being back in person. And some said 9 weeks and some said 4.5 weeks. And so because of the circumstances in an individual case, then students have been approved to move back in earlier and within earlier than the designated deadline. And, you know, I know the commissioner's been on the call with us. I don't know if she wants to jump in and add anything at this juncture, but it is a moving target. I will tell you that much for sure. Dr. Morrison, do you have anything that you want to add? And again, back to if the commissioner is still with us and she wants to add anything before we adjourn.
Sorry, before I was having trouble unmuting. I had to change locations there at the end of our meeting. But no, I don't have anything else to add other than just your thanks again to all of you, both our state board members and our partners at the department and otherwise, for a really thoughtful series of discussions today. I'm always impressed with just the level of insight and thoughtfulness that you bring to these sometimes hard decisions. Nothing else from me, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Commissioner Schwinn, are you still with us?
The Commissioner, Madam Chair, did have to hop off just a few minutes ago, but certainly would echo your comments about the moving target that those numbers often are.
Thank you for that, Charlie. Well, I know we've had a very long meeting, and I thank everybody for their due diligence today and our great discussions. I do want to say one last thing. We are scheduled to meet on November the 6th. We've not made a final determination, but I suspect we may be functioning virtually, but we'll let you know as soon as we know if we'll be able to meet in person. And so without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all.